The night was calm, the kind of evening when the city lights shimmered like jewels against the darkness. A sleek black limousine stopped in front of a luxurious building, and its door opened with a soft click. The man who stepped out was no ordinary man, he was one of the richest billionaires in the country, admired and envied by many. His plan was simple: surprise his girlfriend by arriving earlier than expected. He thought it would be a romantic gesture, but what he found instead shook him to his very core. Before he even reached the entrance, a desperate voice shattered the silence. "Sir, please help me." The cry came from a frail boy pressed against the wall of the building. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt, and his eyes wide with terror. Standing over him, with her hand raised high as if to strike, was the woman the billionaire thought he loved. His girlfriend, glamorous, elegant, and adored by high society. But in that moment she was unrecognizable. "Get away from here, you filthy brat," she hissed, her heel inches from his arm. The boy trembled, his small hands raised in defense, but his gaze shifted when he saw the billionaire. Tears welled in his eyes as he begged, his voice breaking. "Please, sir, don't let her hurt me. She's been tormenting me. And I know who she really is." The billionaire froze. His heart pounded in his chest. What did the boy mean? How could this poor child know anything about the woman he planned to spend his life with? His girlfriend spun around, shock flashing across her face when she realized she had been caught. But the boy didn't stop. With trembling lips, he whispered something that made the billionaire's blood run cold. A secret so dark, so unimaginable, that it threatened to shatter the perfect image he had built of his glamorous partner. In that single instant, the billionaire understood. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. And this is just the beginning of the story. If you believe that the way we treat the most vulnerable reveals who we truly are, then stay with me until the very end, because this story will shock you. By daylight, his life looked like a magazine spread: clean lines, glass walls, priceless art washed in soft morning light. People said the billionaire had earned everything a man could want: a company that shaped the skyline, a name that opened any door, and a romance that looked perfect from every angle. When cameras found him on red carpets, she was always at his side, elegant, poised, a shimmer of diamonds catching the flash. They called her graceful. They called them inevitable. He remembered their first evening together, a gala for a hospital wing he had funded. She'd floated through the room as if she owned the air, offering compliments with uncanny precision, laughing at the exact pitch that made people feel interesting. She had looked at him as if she saw who he truly was, past the numbers and the power, straight into something tender he rarely showed. It disarmed him. He didn't fall in love, he surrendered. The weeks that followed stitched themselves into a narrative he wanted to believe. She texted him reminders to drink water between meetings. She left notes on his kitchen counter. "You're carrying the world again. Put it down for an hour." When his board pushed a brutal acquisition, she tilted her head and said, "You don't need to win every war to be a king." He laughed then, half at the line, half because he felt seen. He took her to the coast at sunrise, to a mountain lake at dusk, to rooftops where the city glittered like a constellation that had chosen them. The world agreed. They were a story with a happy ending already built in. But even the smoothest glass has hairline fractures invisible at first glance. He recalled a lunch at a private club where the staff moved like choreography, gloved hands, quiet precision. The maitre d' brought a dish out slightly late. Her smile froze, then tightened by a millimeter. "Basic standards," she murmured. It wasn't loud, but it was surgical. The maitre d' apologized twice. She didn't nod, didn't soften. The air cooled by a few degrees, and the lunch resumed as if nothing had happened. That evening, when he replayed the scene, he filed it under "She expects excellence." He had always told himself he did too. Another memory surfaced. A winter afternoon when a junior employee bumped into her in the lobby, spilling coffee on his own sleeve. She dabbed a napkin at a dot that hadn't touched her silk and said, "If you can't handle your hands, you can't handle a future." Her tone was light, almost teasing. The employee laughed with her because what else was there to do? Later, the billionaire sent the young man a new coat as a quiet apology he couldn't name. He remembered a charity brunch. Children of a shelter had drawn pictures of the city, marker skies and sunbursts. She applauded the effort, then took him aside and whispered, "They should teach them perspective lines even at that age. No one respects talent that doesn't look like talent." He'd smiled, unsure why the sentence sat like a pebble in his shoe all afternoon. He told himself she was honest. He told himself honesty is a rare mercy. He adored how she carried rooms. He admired her speed, how she could step into conversation after conversation and never stumble. If someone bragged, she lifted them higher. If someone doubted, she supplied a glittering proof. If someone suffered, she offered a sentence that sounded like balm. People left her presence feeling improved. He left her presence feeling chosen. Still, there were nights he woke in his penthouse to a silence that felt curated. The apartment had become a museum to their life. Flowers arranged, books placed face out, a piano with its lit up as if the music had just paused for breath. He would lie there listening to the city's distant pulse and wonder why he felt like a guest inside a masterpiece that belonged to someone else. Every love story has a contract, spoken or not. His had simple clauses. He would provide a life of grace, she would keep the air shimmering. In private, when he showed her the scar behind his left shoulder, earned on a construction site long before the boardroom, she traced it with a thumb and said, "Proof that you build." He had never told anyone that story. He mistook recognition for intimacy. He mistook curation for care. The first time he heard her voice sharpen at a driver who took a wrong turn, the edge lasted only a second. "We're late," she said, then immediately softened. "Don't worry." She tipped generously. The driver thanked them twice, and in the rearview mirror the billionaire watched the man's shoulders relax. It became a habit, counting how often she cut and then sutured the wound with charm. The cuts were tiny, the stitches expert. If the world didn't bleed, did it matter? He kept a list in his head of reasons to trust her. The nights she waited in hospital lobbies with him while an engineer's father lay in surgery, the way she never complained when plans changed for a crisis, the fact that she learned the names of his executive spouses faster than he did. He also kept a list, smaller, of moments that pinched. A joke at an assistant's expense that lasted a beat too long. A compliment that arrived like a verdict. A quiet satisfaction when a rival stumbled. Two lists, running parallel, never touching. He thought of love as a gravity you don't feel until you try to escape it. He never tried. He built taller walls around their story and hung brighter lights over their path. When doubts knocked, he invited them in for a drink, then watched them leave dizzy and convinced. He didn't notice that doubts, like guests who enjoy the view, always return. So when the boy's voice cracked in the night and the girlfriend's hand hovered like a blade, the sound that ripped through him wasn't only shock, it was recognition. 1,000 hairline fractures, finally mapping themselves into a pattern. He was not yet ready to believe the boy, but he could no longer believe without question. On paper their love was flawless. In memory it glittered. In the small, unguarded moments, it had always asked a price he was suddenly afraid to tally. He had come early to offer a surprise. Instead, the evening delivered a mirror. And as he stared into it, he saw not just the woman beside him, but the parts of himself that had chosen the shine and ignored the shadow. The billionaire's steps faltered as he stared at the scene in front of him. His girlfriend's perfect mask, the one she wore so easily at galas and business dinners, was now twisted with fury. Her hand hovered as if she truly meant to strike, while the boy, no older than 12, pressed himself tighter against the wall, his thin shoulders trembling. "Please, sir," the boy cried again, his voice desperate, cracking under fear. "She's hurting me, she threatened me. I don't want money. I just need you to stop her." The billionaire's pulse hammered in his ears. For a moment, he stood frozen, not because he didn't believe the boy, but because of how swiftly the illusion of his life was unraveling. His girlfriend, sensing his presence fully now, turned sharply. "Darling," she said, her tone instantly transforming into silk. "This boy is filthy, a troublemaker. He tried to grab my bag." The boy shook his head violently, his dirty hair falling over wide, tearful eyes. "That's a lie. I never touched her. I asked for food and she called me trash. Then she said she'd make me regret ever looking at her." Whispers stirred around them. Passers-by slowed, pretending not to look, but unable to tear their eyes away. The billionaire felt the weight of dozens of unseen witnesses. His girlfriend's voice sharpened, pitched low so only he could hear. "Send him away. He's nothing." But the boy stepped forward, his small fists clenched, summoning courage he didn't seem to have moments earlier. "You don't know who she really is," he said, his gaze fixed firmly on the billionaire. "I've seen her before. I know what she's done." The billionaire blinked. What did that mean? "Enough," his girlfriend snapped, her voice breaking with irritation. "He's delirious, can't you see? These street rats will say anything for attention." But the boy would not stop. His words came in gasps, but each one carried weight. "She tricked me once, and other kids too. She promised us food, safety, but she used us. She laughed while we cried." His chin quivered, but he stood his ground. "You think she's an angel? She's not." The billionaire felt the ground tilt. He wanted to dismiss the boy's claim, call it the fantasy of a desperate child, but he couldn't ignore the conviction in his eyes. It wasn't the wild rant of someone inventing a story, it was the trembling truth of someone too young to lie so precisely. His girlfriend reached for his arm, her nails grazing his sleeve. "Darling, listen to me. He's insane. He probably followed me looking for someone to blame for his miserable life. Please don't let him ruin our night." But the billionaire pulled his arm away. For the first time, her touch felt cold, manipulative. The boy's lips trembled, and then he added words that made the billionaire's breath catch. "If you don't believe me, ask her where she was the night the shelter closed. Ask her what she did to us." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. His girlfriend's face paled, then flushed red. "Stop this nonsense," she barked, but the crack in her voice betrayed something deeper than annoyance. It was fear. The billionaire bent down slightly, his voice calm but shaking at the edges. "What did she do to you?" The boy's eyes filled again, but he forced the words out. "She made us beg. She told us we were worthless. And she laughed when we cried for our mothers." He looked at the billionaire with pleading eyes. "Please, sir, you're the only one who can stop her." Time seemed to slow. The billionaire felt the fragile weight of two worlds pressing against his chest. The world of luxury, image, perfection, and the world of raw, unvarnished suffering standing in front of him in the form of a trembling child. Around him, silence stretched, heavy and expectant. Every bystander waited to see what he would do. And for the first time in his glittering, carefully curated life, the billionaire realized the choice was not about wealth, reputation, or appearances. It was about truth. And the truth was staring at him with the eyes of a starving boy who had nothing left but the courage to speak. The billionaire's chest tightened as he studied the boy. His small frame shook, but his eyes, wide, dark, and unwavering, did not falter. This was not a tantrum or a trick. It was a testimony. "I know her," the boy said again, his voice cracking but stubborn. "She's not who you think she is. She hurt us." The girlfriend laughed nervously, a brittle sound that rang false. "Darling, listen to him. He's a child. He doesn't know what he's saying. He probably confused me with someone else." But the boy stepped forward, anger flaring through his fear. "No, I'll never forget her face. She came to the shelter. She promised us food, warm beds, safety. She said we could trust her. We believed her." His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. The billionaire crouched, trying to meet the boy at eye level. What happened then? The boy's lips trembled. His eyes darted between the billionaire and the woman standing tall above them. She locked us in a room. She made us beg. She laughed while we cried. She said no one cared about kids like us, that we should be grateful for her attention." His voice rose to a shout, breaking through the night. "She humiliated us." Gasps erupted from the bystanders. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The billionaire's stomach churned, but he forced himself to stay calm. His girlfriend's face hardened. The mask of elegance slipped further. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "He's making up stories to get your sympathy. He probably wants money." The boy shook his head fiercely. "I don't want money. I want the truth to come out." The billionaire pressed a hand against his temple. His world, so carefully constructed, tilted dangerously. He remembered her laughter at charity events, the way she leaned down to kiss children on the forehead for the cameras. Now that same smile twisted in his memory, sharp as broken glass. "Why would you say this?" he asked softly. The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Because it happened. And because she told us if we ever spoke, no one would believe us. She said powerful people always win." The billionaire's breath caught. The boy's words struck deeper than he wanted to admit. He had built an empire on power, power that silenced competitors, power that shaped outcomes. He knew all too well how invisible the powerless could become. His girlfriend's tone sharpened, desperate. "Darling, you can't seriously be entertaining this. You know how people are. They spin lies for attention. He's probably been coached. Look at him, he's dirty, starving. He'll say anything for food." But her voice quivered. The billionaire heard it. So did the crowd. The boy took another step, his voice trembling with defiance. "Ask her about the night the shelter closed. Ask her who gave the order to turn us out in the rain. Ask her why she stood there smiling while we cried at the gate." The billionaire's gaze snapped to his girlfriend. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. For the first time since he had known her, she looked cornered. Memories flickered in his mind, small, almost invisible clues. The way she brushed past beggars in the street with a sneer. How she once told him that some people are born to lose. He had laughed awkwardly then, dismissing it as dark humor. But now, hearing the boy's words, those moments sharpened into evidence. The boy's voice cracked, but he forced out the final blow. She's not who you think. She doesn't love you. She loves control. And if you don't stop her, she'll hurt more kids like me. Silence fell. It was heavy, suffocating. The billionaire's heart thundered, his throat dry. His girlfriend stood frozen, her eyes darting from him to the crowd, searching for a way out. Finally, she found her words, though her voice shook. This is insane. You're going to take the word of a street rat over me? After everything I've given you? My loyalty, my love? The billionaire didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind spun between two realities, the polished woman he thought he knew, and the broken child standing before him, begging for justice. One of them had to be lying. But only one of them looked terrified of the truth. The billionaire had lived his entire life surrounded by polished masks. Business partners who smiled while hiding knives, politicians who promised the world while selling it piece by piece. He thought he knew how to read people. Yet as he looked at the woman beside him, he realized he had been blind all along. Her hand trembled as she clutched her designer purse, eyes darting from the boy to the murmuring crowd. The flawless composure that once made her untouchable was slipping. This is absurd, she said, her voice sharp now, stripped of its practiced warmth. Are you really going to let a filthy child slander me in front of everyone? Me? The boy flinched at her tone, but his chin lifted. You can't hide forever. People saw. I wasn't the only one. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers grew louder. Phones were raised discreetly, recording. The billionaire noticed it, dozens of lenses capturing every word. His girlfriend's eyes widened as she realized too. For the first time, her smile didn't reappear on command. Panic flickered beneath her painted lashes. She reached for his arm, nails digging in just slightly. Darling, please. And this. You know how these things spiral. A single rumor and it ruins everything. Protect me. Protect us. But instead of softening, her plea carried an edge, more demand than request. The billionaire stayed still, his arms stiff beneath her grip. Why don't you tell them? The boy pressed. Why don't you admit what you did to us? Something inside her snapped. Her mask of elegance shattered into jagged pieces. You little liar, she screamed, her voice shrill enough to echo against the stone walls. You think anyone cares about you? You're nothing. Worthless. Gasps exploded from the crowd. Several people stepped back, shocked by the venom in her words. The boy shrank but did not retreat. Tears streamed down his face, but he stood rooted, his defiance glowing through the fear. The billionaire's stomach clenched. For years, he had heard her speak in silken tones, offering compliments so precise they felt like gifts. Now, those same lips curled around cruelty with terrifying ease. You don't belong here, she continued, her voice shaking with rage. You belong in the gutter where you came from. Don't you dare drag me into your pathetic life. The billionaire finally moved. He placed himself between the boy and the woman he thought he loved. The crowd murmured louder, emboldened by what they were witnessing. A woman whispered loudly enough for all to hear, so this is who she really is. The girlfriend froze, realizing the crowd wasn't on her side. She tried to recalibrate, her voice trembling as she forced a smile back onto her face. You see? He provoked me. He's dangerous. That's why I lost my temper. I was only defending myself. But the billionaire heard the falsehood dripping from every syllable. He saw the sweat beading along her temples, the frantic way she scanned the crowd as if searching for an exit. For the first time in their relationship, he didn't see a dazzling partner. He saw a frightened, cornered predator. The boy's small hand tugged at the billionaire's sleeve. His whisper was barely audible, but it carried more truth than her shouting ever could. Don't let her hurt me again. The billionaire's heart cracked. He looked at the boy, then back at the woman who once held his trust. The contrast was undeniable. One stood trembling but honest. The other stood polished but poisonous. And as silence stretched over the crowd, he realized something chilling. Her mask hadn't just cracked tonight. It had been cracking all along. He just hadn't wanted to see it. The billionaire stood rooted in place, the weight of the moment pressing into his chest like stone. Around him, the crowd whispered and shifted, waiting for a reaction. But inside, his thoughts collided like storms. He had built his empire on one unshakable skill: judgment. He could look at a deal, a building site, a balance sheet, and see the truth hidden beneath the numbers. But tonight, his judgment had failed him. Or had it? His girlfriend still hovered at his side, her eyes glossy with a practiced sheen of innocence. Darling, she whispered, her voice breaking into soft desperation. Don't let them poison you. You know me. You've always known me. Look at him, he's just a boy from the streets, desperate for attention. Her words were familiar, smooth, almost comforting. They pulled at the part of him that remembered the galas, the warm laughter, the mornings when her notes reminded him to rest. For a moment he wanted to believe her again. But then he looked down. The boy clutched his sleeve, his small hand trembling but unrelenting. His eyes, those raw, unpolished eyes, held no performance. Only fear. Only truth. The billionaire's mind raced through memories. He remembered the chauffeur who once confided that she yelled at him when he took the wrong turn. At the time he had brushed it off as stress. He remembered the way she scolded a waitress for bringing sparkling water instead of still. He had laughed it away, telling himself everyone has bad days. He remembered how she once passed a homeless man on the street and muttered under her breath, "Some people are born useless." He had told himself he misheard. Each fragment clicked into place now, forming a pattern he had refused to see. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Was he truly ready to believe a child he had never met over the woman he thought he knew? The woman who had been his partner, his confidant, his chosen future? The boy's voice broke through his storm of thoughts. She'll lie. She'll always lie. But you know the truth, you saw it tonight. The billionaire swallowed hard. His gaze swept over the crowd. Some eyes were sympathetic, others judgmental, but all were watching. And he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever he decided in this moment would not remain private. His girlfriend's grip tightened on his arm. "Please," she hissed under her breath, her tone darker now. "Don't humiliate me like this. Don't let them win." The word echoed in his mind. Not the boy, not the truth. For her, it was always a battle. Winning, losing, controlling. He exhaled sharply and pulled his arm free. "Go home," he said quietly, his voice firm enough to carry. Now. Her face drained of color. For the first time she looked small, stripped of her armor. But she quickly recovered, tossing her hair back, lifting her chin. "Fine. I don't need to stay here and be insulted by lies." She turned sharply and strode toward the waiting car. The crowd parted, whispering, recording, judging. The boy sagged with relief, but the billionaire's stomach twisted. He hadn't cleared anything up, he had only postponed the reckoning. When the car door slammed shut and the night grew quieter, he turned back to the boy. "What's your name?" "Daniel," the boy whispered. The billionaire nodded. "Daniel, I need to know everything." Daniel's eyes flickered with both fear and hope. "I'll tell you, but you have to promise you'll listen." "I will." For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something unfamiliar. Doubt that cut deeper than numbers, deeper than deals. Doubt not just in her, but in himself. And that doubt, he realized, was the beginning of truth. The billionaire was not a man who lived with unanswered questions. In business, uncertainty meant risk, and risk meant disaster. He had built his empire by chasing down every detail, every number, every possibility until only certainty remained. Tonight, however, he carried more uncertainty than ever before. Daniel walked beside him, quiet, hesitant, as they moved away from the crowd. The billionaire's mind burned with questions, but he forced himself to keep his tone calm. "Tell me," he said softly. "Tell me everything you know." Daniel hesitated, eyes fixed on the ground. "If I talk, will you believe me?" The billionaire swallowed, his voice steady but heavy. "I don't know yet, but I promise I will listen." And so the boy spoke. He told him about nights at the shelter when food had run out, when children huddled together against the cold. He told him how she had appeared like a savior, beautiful, smiling, promising meals, blankets, and hope. The children believed her. They followed her. But instead of kindness, she delivered humiliation. She mocked their hunger, laughed at their ragged clothes, and told them no one in the world cared if they lived or died. Sometimes she forced them to beg on the streets while she watched from her car, smirking as people turned them away. Daniel's small voice cracked as he described the night the shelter closed. "We had nowhere to go. And she said we should thank her for teaching us that life is cruel. She said she was giving us a lesson. Then she left us there in the rain." The billionaire's jaw tightened. He felt fury rise in his chest, hot and suffocated. But he forced himself to stay silent until Daniel finished. "Other kids saw it too," Daniel whispered. "I wasn't the only one. Some of them are still out there. Some didn't make it." Those words struck harder than anything else. The billionaire stopped walking. "Other children?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. If you want proof, find them." For the next few days, the billionaire did what he did best. He investigated. quietly, carefully, without alerting his girlfriend. He sent discreet calls through networks that had once built skyscrapers and sealed deals. Only this time he wasn't looking for profit, he was looking for ghosts. One by one the pieces began to surface. A social worker who remembered complaints filed but mysteriously buried. A nurse who once saw her bring children to a clinic only to berate them in front of staff. A driver who recalled late-night trips where she ordered him to wait outside while business was conducted with the children. Each testimony was like a nail driven deeper into the coffin of the image he once adored. But the most devastating moment came when he found another child, now a teenager, who had once stayed at the same shelter. The young man's voice was hollow when he spoke. We all knew her. She made us feel like nothing. She told us no one would believe us if we ever spoke. I thought she was right. The billionaire's stomach turned. The pattern was undeniable. Too many voices, too many scars. Yet even as the evidence mounted, a small part of him resisted. He remembered the woman who had laughed at his jokes, who had touched his shoulder during moments of stress, who had made the world believe in their love story. Could that woman truly be the same person these children described? Late one night, he sat alone in his study, files and notes spread across his desk. The city glittered beyond the glass, a skyline he had conquered. But for the first time the lights felt hollow. Daniel sat curled in a chair nearby, asleep at last after hours of recounting memories that no child should carry. The billionaire studied the boy's face, tired, lined with hardship far beyond his years. And then it struck him, he had been given a mirror. One side showed the polished illusion he had clung to, the other showed the raw truth he could no longer deny. There was no more room for doubt. He knew what he had to do. But truth, he also knew, came with a price. The next step would not be quiet. It would not be private. It would be a confrontation. The billionaire was not a man who feared conflict. Boardrooms, negotiations, hostile takeovers, he had faced them all with cold precision. But this confrontation was different. This wasn't about contracts or power. It was about truth, dignity, and a child who had been silenced for too long. He arranged the meeting in a place she would never expect. A private dinner hosted in one of the city's most exclusive clubs. The chandelier light glimmered against crystal glasses and polished wood, the perfect backdrop for elegance. Guests mingled, unaware that the night would soon transform into a reckoning. She arrived radiant, every strand of hair flawless, her dress shimmering like armor. When she saw him waiting, she smiled as if nothing had happened. "Darling," she greeted warmly, leaning in for a kiss. But he stepped back and her smile faltered. "We need to talk," he said simply. She laughed lightly. "Of course, but can it wait until after dinner? People are watching." "They should watch," he replied, his voice low but sharp. Confusion flickered across her face, quickly replaced by irritation. She was used to controlling the stage, never being cornered. The billionaire turned, and from the shadows stepped Daniel, his small figure dwarfed by the room's grandeur. A hush fell over the nearby tables. Whispers stirred as eyes widened. What was a street boy doing here? Her mask cracked immediately. "What is he doing here?" she hissed. "He's here to tell the truth," the billionaire said, his voice carrying through the hall. Gasps rippled. Guests leaned closer, curiosity overtaking their plates. Phones appeared, discreetly filming. Daniel's voice trembled but did not break. "I know her. She heard us at the shelter. She made us beg, mocked us, and said no one would care if we spoke." The girlfriend laughed, too loudly, the sound brittle. "This is insane. You bring a liar into my world, into our circle? Don't humiliate yourself with this nonsense." But the billionaire was prepared. He reached into his pocket and placed documents on the table. Testimonies from the nurse, the driver, the social worker. Witnesses who had seen, heard, remembered. Each paper was a dagger against her facade. "Enough lies," he said, his voice echoing through the stunned room. "I have proof. I have voices. And they all say the same thing. You used your beauty to hide your cruelty." Her face twisted, anger bursting through her glamour. "You believe them over me? After everything I've given you? You're throwing it all away for this?" She gestured wildly at the boy, her composure disintegrating. But no one in the room saw elegance anymore. They saw venom. Daniel stepped closer, his small voice cutting sharper than her screams. "You can't hide anymore. People know now. He knows." For a moment, silence reigned. The billionaire looked into her eyes and saw the truth. There was no remorse, no regret. Only fury at being exposed. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a verdict. "It's over. Whatever we had ends tonight." Her face crumpled, not in sorrow but in rage. She slammed her glass onto the table, shards scattering like broken illusions. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice shrill. "I made you shine and I can make you fall." But the crowd had already judged. Eyes that once admired her now burned with disgust. Phones captured every second, ensuring her downfall would not remain private. Daniel clung to the billionaire's side, and for the first time the boy felt safe. The billionaire placed a steady hand on his shoulder and whispered so only he could hear, "You're not alone anymore." The room exhaled collectively, the confrontation sealed. The hall still buzzed with whispers when she stormed out, shards of glass crunching under her heels. The door slammed behind her, leaving only silence and the faint tremor of what had just unfolded. For a moment, the billionaire stood motionless, the weight of his choice settling on his shoulders. The life he had curated, glamorous parties, polished smiles, the illusion of a perfect partner, had just shattered in front of everyone. But instead of regret, he felt something strange. Relief. He looked down at Daniel. The boy's wide eyes searched his face, as if unsure whether the billionaire would abandon him too. The billionaire crouched, leveling his gaze. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "She won't hurt you again." Daniel blinked, then burst into tears. Not the tears of fear, but the raw, uncontrollable release of someone finally believed. The billionaire pulled him into a steady embrace, feeling the frailness of his body, the bones too sharp beneath his skin. The guests, once eager to gossip, now softened. Some put down their phones. A few approached quietly, offering words of support. But the billionaire ignored them all. His focus was on Daniel. "Come with me," he said. "From tonight forward, you're not alone." That night, the limousine carried them through the glittering city. Daniel pressed his face to the window, awe flickering through exhaustion. For the first time in years, he sat in warmth, not rain. At the penthouse, the boy hesitated at the threshold, afraid to step onto the marble floor. I don't belong here," he whispered. The billionaire placed a hand on his shoulder. "You belong wherever you're safe. And from now on, that's here." Over the following days, changes rippled through the billionaire's life. He cut ties publicly with his girlfriend, her name splashed across headlines for all the wrong reasons. Investors asked questions, tabloids speculated, but he didn't flinch. His empire had weathered storms before. This time he wasn't defending money, he was defending truth. More importantly, he began making quiet arrangements for Daniel. Doctors examined him. Nutritionists helped him regain strength. Lawyers reopened old complaints that had been buried. And slowly, other children emerged from the shadows. Daniel hadn't been lying, he hadn't been alone. Each testimony deepened the billionaire's resolve. Where once he saw children as faces in charity brochures, now he saw them as Daniel's brothers and sisters, souls who deserved more than pity. They deserved justice. One evening, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a plate of food before him. He hesitated, fork in hand, staring at the meal as if it might disappear. "You don't have to rush," the billionaire said gently. "It's yours. Tomorrow and the day after that too." Daniel looked up, his eyes wet. "No one ever promised me tomorrow before." The billionaire's throat tightened. In that moment, he realized that redemption wasn't about erasing mistakes. It was about choosing differently, starting now. The break had been painful, humiliating, and public. But in its ashes, something new was growing. Something honest. As he walked through his penthouse later that night, watching Daniel asleep on the couch with a blanket drawn over him, the billionaire understood. He had not lost. He had been set free. The city glittered beneath the penthouse windows, towers of glass shimmering like promises. But inside, the billionaire's home felt different. For the first time, it wasn't a gallery of perfection. It was quiet, warm, human. Daniel stirred on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, his chest rising in steady rhythm. The billionaire stood nearby, watching him sleep. Each breath the boy took seemed to echo louder than the applause of shareholders, louder than the clink of champagne at galas. He thought of the life he had lived until this point, measured in profit margins, luxury, and appearances. He thought of the woman who had walked at his side, dazzling the world while hiding cruelty in the shadows. He thought of the moment her mask had cracked, and how blind he had been for so long. Wealth, he realized, had insulated him. It had built walls so tall that he never saw what was happening beyond them. He had mistaken elegance for goodness, charm for kindness, beauty for virtue. And he had almost paid for that mistake with his soul. But one trembling voice had changed everything. A boy who had nothing, not money, not power, not status, had stood up and spoken truth. That truth had cost him years of pain. Yet it was that same truth that saved the billionaire from living a lie. The lesson was clear. True character is revealed not in ballrooms or boardrooms, but in the way we treat those who have nothing to offer us. He poured himself a glass of water and sat by the window, his gaze falling across the city that once seemed like a kingdom. Now it looked fragile, built on illusions too easy to shatter. He vowed to rebuild, not just his empire but himself. Daniel stirred again, whispering in his sleep. The billionaire leaned closer, hearing fragments. "Please, sir, don't let her hurt me." Even in dreams, the boy's fears lingered. The billionaire placed a hand gently over the blanket, reassuring even though Daniel could not hear. "You're safe now," he murmured, "and you'll never be alone again." In that moment he felt a shift, not of power or wealth but of purpose. He had been given another chance. He would not waste it. Tomorrow there would be calls to make, lawyers to brief, foundations to build. Tomorrow there would be headlines, scrutiny, perhaps even more battles. But tonight there was silence, a boy finally safe and a man finally awake. And as dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the city gold, the billionaire understood that he had not just ended a relationship. He had ended an illusion. What remained was raw, uncertain, but real. And in that reality he found something money had never bought him. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one, and share this video with someone who needs to hear its message. And before you go, write in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled.